Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's episode number 89 of the Audible Farm podcast. This week's episode is brought to you by Couchtown Coffee. I just got some more Couchtown Coffee in, and ooh, that's good stuff. I'm drinking some right now. Couchtown Coffee is my favorite coffee. It's roasted right here in Iowa. Each batch is roasted for whoever ordered it. So if you order coffee, they're roasting a batch specifically for you. That's some of the coolest thing ever. I mean, if you want coffee, it's like getting custom-made coffee. How cool is that? It's roasted right here in Iowa, too. Can't beat that. And not only that, the roaster over at Couchtown, Andrew, will give you 20% off. How you get 20% off? Well, it's easy. You make an order at www.couchtowncoffee.com, and when you make an order, let them know Audible Farm sent you there. Enter the code word CUSTOM. Entering the code word CUSTOM will save you 20% on any order you make this week at couchtowncoffee.com. Check it out, Couchtown Coffee. Support local. All right, episode number 89. Who am I sitting down with this week? Well, the code word was custom, so I'm sitting down with a custom guitar builder. I'm sitting down with Steve Reuter. Steve runs SLR Guitars. You can go check him out online. We got links down below for that. We discuss how he got interested in building guitars in the first place, some of the first steps he took as far as getting a hold of people and trying to bounce ideas off other people, some of his first builds, some of his craziest builds. We go through all sorts of good stuff in this podcast. It was really neat to sit down and be able to talk with Steve because there's not too many custom guitar builders around the state. We discussed that very little bit in the podcast, but he's one of a very, very, very small group of people making custom guitars in Iowa, which is really cool. Not only that, but his guitars aren't just for Iowa. I mean, we were talking after the podcast, he sold them all across the U.S. He's sold some here in Iowa. So if you want to check them out, I highly suggest it. SLRguitars.com. We're going to get right into this episode because this one's a great one. I'm sitting down with Steve. I hope everybody likes this one. It's episode 89 with SLR Guitars, Luthier, and builder, Steve Reuter.
It's the Audible Farm Podcast with your host, Peter Stockdale.
Today, I'm sitting down with Steve Reuter. Steve, I actually found you because you commented on a post I had on a previous podcast featuring Matt Woods. And, it got me kind of to be like, what is this guitar company that's commenting on my stuff? And I clicked on it, and you're based in Iowa.
Yeah, that's crazy.
There's probably, how many guitar companies are based in Iowa? Like one?
One?
Maybe.
Yeah, there's a couple.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a couple smaller companies kind of budding up here in the Iowa area, and I got to say, it's really, really awesome. I love the fact there's some DIY people out there doing the things they're doing and firing up some of these companies from start. You run SLR Guitars. That's the company that we're talking about today.
Yep.
Yeah. And how'd you get started in on this? Was it something that, like, when you were a kid, were you always like woodworking, or was there something like that, or how did it all?
It's kind of a combination of woodworking and like a guitar obsession. I mean, I always thought that woodworking would be a fun hobby to get into after I, got after college and got out on my own and stuff. And but I was just always obsessed with guitars, and I played, but I was never great at it. And I was in bands for like a minute, nothing even played out, just some rehearsal type stuff. But so I never got to be great at playing. I've always been obsessed with like collecting guitars and just having them. I've always wanted like basically one of everything that there's been out there. But so then after college and after getting a house where I had some room for equipment and stuff, I was like, I'm just going to try some little woodworking projects. And in the back of my mind, I thought, if that evolves into something with guitars, that'd be great. But I still thought that like basically guitars are made in nothing but factories, and just like these huge factories with these magic machines that they just dump parts into, and out the back spits like a guitar. I mean, I had no concept of like what went into building them, and I just I had always assumed that like the people running those huge machines were just, like the super skilled, and I'm sure they are, but like the tolerances built into a guitar, like, the measurements of the frets and the size of everything. I just thought it was just all magic. And there's no way that I could possibly even come close to putting something like that together. And because I just assumed that either you had this like magic guitar art piece that everything, aligned and it worked perfect, or like there was no middle ground between that and just like an unplayable paperweight. Like, I always just thought if I screw just one tiny little thing up by like 0.5 millimeter, it's going to be absolutely unplayable and just a total waste of time. And so I just thought, that's probably way too much for me to, to bite off, and I no woodworking skills, no nothing. And so, I was just in the bookstore one day and I happened to look down and see this book called Make Your Own Electric Guitar by Melvin Hiscock. And I kind of laughed. I was like, yeah, right. These people are, making these in their garage or something. So I just picked it up and started thumbing through it. And that's exactly what it was. I mean, he explained like the steps to go through from beginning to end on 3 or 4 different types of builds, like a bass and a couple different types of guitars. And just looking at it, I was like, holy crap, I maybe I could handle this. And in the book, I think there was references for other small time, kind of one man or, small shop operations. And that's when it hit me for the first time that, holy crap, all these things aren't made in just huge factories. I mean, there's actually skilled people that can put them together and make, something that's, custom and unique and playable. And so I started looking around at those resources, and ironically, there was a guy in Des Moines. His name's Dave Plummer, and he unfortunately since passed away. But he had a nice shop there in Des Moines, and has made guitars for some big names. And I thought, holy crap, I got to go, just talk to this guy, and just looked him up in the white pages of Des Moines, give him a call, and asked him if I could come over, and he said sure. So went over, and in like 5 minutes, we started talking about some sort of internship. And so then I was like super excited. And I had a full-time job somewhere else. And I don't even know what made me think I could just, take on some sort of internship at guitar company.
You got all the time in the world.
Exactly. I didn't even care at that point. I was like, holy crap. Yeah. This is like coming together. I just learned yesterday that I could build a guitar, and now I'm going to have an internship at a guitar company.
Wow. The turnaround was that quick?
Oh, it was all within a week. And
whoa.
Then, yeah. So then he looks at me, he's like, oh, okay. He got caught under really what, the situation was. And he's like, yeah, I'm not looking for somebody just to come in here and, like teach everything at night. Cause I was like, well, I work during the day. I could come in at night. And he's like, well, I work during the day.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that didn't really work out, but it was super nice. And he's like, hey, you just, try to, work out stuff on your own, and you can just drop by here anytime with, projects that you've got going on, and I'll, help you through, rough patches or, give you some advice on stuff. So that was fantastic. So I was like, well, great. Now I've got a resource and I've got a book, and, and if I screw something up, I can take it to this guy and hopefully he can point me in the right direction. And then, so the next day I went to, I started collecting like little, hobby tools, like, small scale power tools, thinking, okay, I'll need a router and I'll need, a little baby bandsaw and that kind of stuff. And so I was at the woodsmith store in Des Moines looking for wood, because I was like, well, I need some materials. And I started asking the salesman about it, and he was like, oh, what are you going to build? And I almost didn't want to say, because it's still in my mind, it was like, okay, this is like insane woodworking projects, and I haven't even built a shelf yet, and here I'm going to try to build a guitar. And so I was like, well, I want to build a guitar. And he goes, oh, great. Yeah, there's no problem. He goes, there's a guy that works here that builds guitars in his basement, in his off hours. I'm like, holy crap. People are everywhere building guitars. Right. So he goes, yeah, come back the next day and, tomorrow. And he's working tomorrow, and, maybe he'll help you out. So I went back the next day, and that guy was like, oh, yeah, I used to work with Dave, and And, I work here during the day, but I build guitars at night, and I've got a full shop. And if you want to, bring your stuff over, I'll take you through your first build, and you can take notes, ask me tons of questions. And so that's what I did and all of that happened within a week. So I went from
wild.
No thought about ever building a guitar to like, holy crap, now I'm going over to this guy's house, once a week, and he's showing me everything I need to do. So it was awesome. But so I just went over there and had some materials, and he helped me plan it out. And I basically did all the sanding and that kind of stuff, but he did all the cutting and measuring, things that I could, probably not recover from, or could, take a off or something like that. And, but when I, at the end of the process, I had a nice guitar that, that plays and it looks pretty good. And I was like, holy crap, that guy did most of the work, but, this is definitely possible. And I asked him probably a question every 30 seconds and had all these notebooks I was writing stuff down in. So yeah, I was probably not as prepared as I thought I was for continuing to start building them on my own, but I've just kind of, worked at it and got better and better over the years, hopefully. And I guess that's where it started, was like this whirlwind week of going from no exposure to, hanging out in a couple guys' shops.
Yeah, you went from not knowing how to swim to jumping in the deep end pretty quick.
Yeah, no doubt. And I don't know, I probably should have started. Well, I think I probably would have started with buying a neck and then building a body, which is what a lot of people do, because the necks are kind of, a lot more finicky. There's a lot more tight tolerance measurements involved with building the neck part. But since I was going to this guy's house, I'm like, well, anything that I'm about to screw up, I mean, he could probably, guide me away from that. And so I've never bought any prefabricated parts. I went right into, doing everything from raw lumber. So that was probably a big benefit, because I probably would have, I would have probably built guitars a lot faster if I would have bought, pre-made parts. But, now, from the very beginning, I had an idea of really what goes into, building everything from scratch.
That's mind blowing. Like, so much of this is crazy to me. Like, it all started with you reading a book. That's like the most mind blowing thing.
Like, as a joke too, because I picked it up going, yeah, no way. I thought this is, the gimmick. This is, but it was. I still have that book, and it's like beat to crap, because it's a great reference, and I go through it all the time. Well, I haven't been through it for a little while, but it's a great book.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, it's kind of funny because it goes along with like one of my favorite movie lines of all time. There's a movie called Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man, and one guy asks another guy, how'd you learn to shoot your gun like that? And the guy says, I read a book. It came with the gun. And that always like stuck with me. It's like, how'd you learn to do this? Well, I read a book. And that always seemed to be like, well, yeah, I guess you could probably just read a book and figure out how to do this. But it's mind blowing that, like, I mean, even on a farce, you were just like, I'm going to pick this thing up. Just like you already had your nose turned up at it pretty much. And you were like, oh, this is actually really good. And you took it home and you followed through with it, which is probably the craziest part. I'm not sure if it was, if I was scoffing at my own level of skill, or at the notion that a book would teach you how to build something that I still thought was like, some magic process. But either way, I mean, I'm so glad I saw it, because I realized that, within reading the instructions in the book and it having references in the back to other small builders, I'm like, holy crap. I mean, there's people that are really doing this. So why not me? I could give her a shot. Yeah. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense. It wasn't until, I mean, I played guitar for quite a while before I realized there was companies that were making guitars, I want to say like on a smaller scale, and selling them, and they were like a big deal. One of the first companies I found out about was the original Tobias bass guitar company was made by like all the bass guitars they made before like 1990, 2000, I don't know, somewhere in the mid 2000s. Everything they made before that, before Gibson bought them, was made by like 3 guys in a tiny shed. And I was like, I didn't know that like, a small group of people could hammer out guitars like this. And I mean, that's kind of one of the things that intrigues me about what you're doing, is the fact that, as far as I know, you're just a one-person operation making all these things, right?
Yep, just me. And I had the same thought when I started, once I started communicating with and finding, information about these other small builders. More often than not, again, when I first realized it, I was like, okay, these guys have, either they used to work at Gibson or something, and they've got these fancy woodworking outfitted shops, that they're going to. And more often than not, if I'd see a picture of somebody's shop, or I'd, see something on a website, like the internet was pretty new then, but I mean, some information was out there. They were just like people's dirty basements and small, like little tiny woodworking shed that they were getting by with. And I'm like, holy crap, or I've seen videos and pictures of people doing work on like their apartment patio, like their deck. I mean, I thought,
oh, wow,
if these guys can, make an effort to put something together. I've got a garage that, it's not full of woodworking tools yet, but I sure as hell got more space than they do. And I can give that a shot.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm with you 100% on all this stuff, because a lot of it seems like okay, so I'm going to admit this. Like, I've always wanted to build a guitar. I always thought it'd be really cool, but I took the short way out. And I bought like a guitar that's already made that could use some upgrades, and then I like modified it a whole bunch and upgraded it. So I didn't make a neck. I didn't cut a neck hole. I don't have a big shop. I just kind of, for lack of better terms, I kind of bought like a piece of junk guitar and fixed it up so it actually functions better. And like when I was doing that, I was thinking to myself, I'd really like to try and build one of these guitars. But then like the more I was looking at it, I'm like, man, if I paint this thing and I get paint in the neck hole, it's going to mess the way the neck action is. And I mean, everything about it was just like, I don't know if I could build a neck if I had to. And then if I was like, well, if I want to build a guitar, I could probably cut one out. But if you don't cut the neck hole right, the whole thing is right. The whole thing's junk,
Yeah, that's a great place to start, and that's where a lot of people start. I mean, there's more guitar builders probably start doing that than they do, just jumping in the deep end like I did. And I mean, but I don't want to make it sound like I was super daring. I mean, I knew I had those other guys as, resources and backup plans, like right in my backyard. So I knew I had some help there. And, but I think more players, evolve into builders the way you're describing, because they have their own instruments that they want to get something different out of, or they want to, make it unique on their own. And so they're tweaking things and modding things. And then that evolves into like, bigger mods, and then doing repairs. And then, by that point, they know all of the inner workings of how guitars fit together. And so like, there's probably only a couple little woodworking things that are, still like, they need practice with, or they're, not sure exactly how they work. And maybe I didn't start with tweaking and modding my guitars because, from at the beginning, before I started building, I was still kind of in love with I still am, but I was in love with my guitars. There was no way I, wanted to take the chance of jacking them up. And so, and I didn't have like another sound I was searching for or anything like that. I mean, I thought they were perfect the way they were. This is why I, bought those particular ones.
Yep.
So I think it was probably more my interest, like my double interest in woodworking, which made me think, well, cutting out the body and doing it from raw lumber will be fun. And if I get to some woodworking exposure and some practice, and if it evolves into a guitar that I can play, that's awesome. So, and at that way back then, I kind of thought that, well, I'll do some woodworking projects too. Maybe I'll build some furniture. Maybe I'll do, some other stuff. But I mean, once I built my first guitar, I was like, I don't ever want to build that shelf. I don't want to build a chair. I mean, all I want to do is build guitars. And so I never quite got around to, any spice rack or anything like that.
Yeah. When was the first? What year did you make your first guitar?
It was in the early '90s, so probably like 93, 94, something like that.
Oh, so that's when you picked up the book and started getting a hold of. That's why you had to use the white pages.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah. The amount of internet resources that there are now is insane compared to then. And I got lucky because when my interest really started to evolve in building, I mean, the internet existed, but it wasn't, there wasn't a ton of just, of sites out there and forums and that kind of stuff. And as I just got into the building process or the hobby, I had those local resources, like I mentioned, but also at that same time, like these internet forums just exploded with, so everyone who was in the same boat as I was, who had, like a garage shop or just building their first guitar or their first 10 guitars or whatever. Now there's these online forums where people just share pictures and information and questions and problems and solutions and stuff. And so I, basically before my second guitar was built, I mean, I went from, just a few guys to, a few websites that had, people all over the world that were doing exactly what I wanted to do. So I've never been, one of those guys like the people that came before me that wanted to build a guitar and they just had to just practice on stuff and, take it to their local, guitar shop and say, well, what's wrong with this? Or, I have always had the advantage of having a ton of resources to go to if I was stuck on something.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I think a lot of people forget about, is the fact that the internet hasn't always been around.
Right. Yeah. I keep trying to explain that to my daughter.
Yeah, I didn't start playing guitar until, let's see, I got to make a guesstimate on this. Probably about 2003, and even then, like guitar and the internet wasn't as blown up as it is today. You could go online and find websites or YouTube videos here and there of people trying to teach you how to play guitar. And I mean, nowadays there's no shortage of that. It seems like everybody's got a YouTube channel trying to teach someone how to play guitar. And that's awesome, because actually I love going through a lot of like the Iowa-based people's YouTube channels on their lessons, and even then you can find some cool stuff. But it's one of those crazy things to think that the internet hasn't always been around, and you gotta kind of start somewhere. And a lot of people just don't. It's one of those things. It's how quickly we forget, pre-internet, how you have to gather your information or even network with people. Like we said earlier, you had to go to the white pages, and there's people that probably don't even know what the white pages are these days.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I haven't had a phone book in my house for 20 years or 15 years. I don't know. I mean, one gets delivered every once in a while and it becomes, like right into the recycle bin. But that used to be the way to find anything was white and yellow pages. But
yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's probably something back in the, I don't want to say like the early 2000s, late 90s, there probably wasn't too much around for like, if you go to the white pages and you flip to Luthier, or if you go to the yellow pages and you flip through and you're like, there's not a whole lot of stuff in the Luthier section,
No, I can't imagine there was. And that, I guess it's pretty lucky that I even found Dave Plummer, because I remember it was his personal number, like his, it showed his address and it showed his name and number. And so, and it wasn't his, his business name, and there was nothing in the yellow pages for that. And that, like you said, there was no internet where I can go to a web page. I mean, he since had a web page after that, I think, but, so it was just me calling on his home phone and, say, does a guitar builder live here? His shop just happened to be like in a 2-stall garage or 2 or 3-stall garage that was attached to his house. And so,
oh, cool.
It was just nice that he was courteous enough to, allow me to come out and poke around, and then also, let me come out there with any kind of issues. And so, I did go out there when I was working on a personal guitar at home while I was working on this, my first guitar in that other guy's shop, and I was just stuck on some stuff, doing the actual woodworking myself. I'm like, okay, this angle's not right, or this, this neck is totally wonky. And they were able to, they spent some time saying, well, you need to sand this way, and maybe try, this different neck angle next time. And so it was great to go out there.
I'm sure that's got to be a lot to try and process, because if somebody's ever just played a guitar and never actually looked into the schematics of building a guitar, there's a lot of angles. There's a lot of, even as far as like how far the headstock pitches away from the neck to get proper tuning to stay in tune. I mean, there's all sorts of goofy measurements that, I mean, even from one major guitar company to the next, like they might not follow the exact same specifications. And I mean, I'm sure there's no written law as in like, this is the only way to do it, but I'm sure there are some like typical guidelines. Like, well, most of the time the guitar needs to be built like this.
Right. Yeah, there's some kind of not even written in stone, but there's a few measurements or ratios that need to stay within certain tolerances to get the thing to intonate, or the thing to stay in tune, or the strings to stay attached to the body and neck. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of insane things that people, certain companies, this is the one way we do it, and this is right, and everyone else is wrong. And there's constant debates about tone woods and neck angles and headstock angles and spacing and stuff like that you could just go down a rabbit hole forever and get into. And the important thing for me to discover in all that is that further kind of like solidified my awareness that, holy crap, there isn't just one magic way to do this, and it's not a piece of workable art or nothing. I mean, there's all kinds of gray area in between. I mean, obviously if I do something wrong, it doesn't stay in tune, or the strings pop off, like, well, okay, that was a mistake. I need to work from that. But yeah, there is definitely more than one way to put them together. That's for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, one thing I started realizing the more I got into guitars was, I'll just use one model of guitar as an example, but let's just say the Les Paul. The Les Paul has, through the years, it was like built like a tank in its original years. There's no weight relief on almost any of it. The things were like 12, 13 pounds or something.
Yeah.
And then they started doing a little tiny bit of weight relief, and it shaved them down to about 9 pounds or less. And I mean, nowadays, if you pick up a Les Paul, they're so weight relieved that the thing doesn't even weigh any more than a Fender Strat, which to people that haven't picked up different guitars might not think too much about it. But I mean, for a while there, I've was like a Les Paul freak show fanatic. It was like my favorite guitar. It just had everything I wanted in it, and I was trying all these different ones out, and I didn't realize that like the weight relief that was drilled into them made all the difference in the weight. And back in the day, like a solid guitar, the more solid it is, the better the resonance and all this other nonsense. Yeah. But since then, they've figured out how to like weight relieve them and still get the best sounds out of them. Is that anything you've looked into, like weight relieving a guitar?
Yeah, I don't mind a heavy guitar, and so a lot of what goes into what I choose to use is just the cosmetics of it. I like the look of wood. I like the look of and feel of a super thin finish, like an oil finish that allows the wood grain to kind of pop, and maybe put a dye here or there on it to change a little bit of the color, but always seeing the wood. I've never been a huge fan of solid colors and heavy plastic type finishes, just because maybe kind of goes back to why I was interested in woodworking. I like the look and the feel of wood, and so there's a lot of that creates pretty damn heavy instruments. And so it's not for everyone. I mean, but that's probably the most common thing that I hear or see people like on the internet trying out instruments, and they always want to know the weight of it, and they pick it up like, oh geez, this thing is feather light. And I guess I've never really put much of a in my own personal guitars, I didn't really care how heavy they were, because I wasn't, sitting up on the stage playing them for hours, and that, I could sit down and so fatigue wasn't really an issue for me. But sometimes, like if I'm building something with a particular, it's usually the body is like a really dense, heavy piece of wood, because I like the look of it for the top of the guitar. I'll incorporate like either scooping out, weight relieving it and putting an additional top on it. If there was some other, wood, like a figured maple top or something put on there, or I'll just make an extra large cavity control cavity in the back, to kind of remove some of the weight of it. But I'm not really shooting for like a particular, end goal on, like, okay, the guitar's got to be under 8 pounds, or, no one's going to want it.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm kind of with you on that. I've never been one to think too much about, I need a light guitar so I can run around and do stuff on stage. I played for a long time with a very, very heavy Les Paul, and that was like that kind of trained me to be like, well, whatever. You can run around with something that's 9 pounds or something that's 5 pounds or whatever. It's not that big a deal to me, I guess, the weight of a guitar. I'm kind of one of those people that you go on the internet and the people, oh, the heavier guitars are better, and I was just like, yes, the heavier guitars are better, and I just agreed with them blindly and went with it. But I've, as of recently, played some very weight relieved guitars that have insane tones, so I guess I can't say that the weight of the guitar is the only bearing on the way that it sounds.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I know I've read all kinds of studies, people either with two exact guitars side by side, weight relieved versus non-weight relieved, or different wood, tone woods, and attempting to measure the the tonal difference between the two. And I guess I haven't played enough of the same types of guitars through the same rig, and my ear's not precise enough, I guess, to really like pick up one and go, oh man, that's crap, and then pick up another one. I just enjoy the experience of playing the guitar. I mean, if it feels nice and it doesn't, the frets aren't sticking out and chopping up your hands, and you can get a sound out of it, and then I still enjoy it. I mean, I admire those people that can like dissect the individual frequency ranges of a rig, and it's like, oh geez, I need more 17 dB push on that. It's like, I don't hear that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Nerds.
Okay.
No, really though,
it's
that's
amazing, but
it is cool stuff. I wish I had the ability to do something like that. Unfortunately to me, a lot of the differences are to what I call they're inaudible. I mean, some people will argue that the human ear can't even hear some of the differences that you can measure, which is kind of where I lean towards. It's like, well, I guess if you can't really actually audibly hear the difference, then maybe there, isn't actually any difference.
Right.
I mean, some of that's also like a car, though. Not every car is built exactly the same. And if the car drives well, then what difference does it make if it's got 450 horse or 400 horse, or if it weighs 2 tons or 10 tons? It doesn't, it doesn't matter, I guess.
Yep. If it's getting you where you want to go and you're not frustrated the entire trip, then what's wrong with the one that you got?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You were talking about putting like some sort of a top on top of guitars, as far as you make it out of one wood. If whether or not you do any weight relieving, sometimes you'll put like some sort of a figured wood on the top to accent the front of the guitar. I went to your website and I found a Telecaster that you built in your gallery here that has one of those custom tops on it. I don't know if you're probably not next to your computer and can't see it, but what kind of wood was on this Telecaster? Do you know? Because it looks like it's got some sort of a maybe maple or mahogany body. And
I know which one you're talking about. It's
like
got a maple
brown
body, and it's actually walnut. And I found that piece of walnut in like a cutoff bin at a door and window supply shop in Des Moines when I was like, just poking around whatever lumber yards I could find, wood in. And since it was like a short piece, they couldn't sell it by the board foot, which is what they usually do for lumber. And so they just had a price of $4. So I bought that for $4, and I thought, oh, this looks pretty nice. And I took it home and I did what's called resawing it, where we're book matching it. So I cut it down the middle and opened it up like a book. And so you've got, kind of mirror images of each other left and right, because it wasn't wide enough to use as a one-piece top. So I sliced it down thin and opened it up, and like, oh, this looks pretty nice. And then, so I just needed, something to make it a little bit thicker, because I think that piece of maple that I had, wasn't quite as thick as I wanted it to be. And so I thought, oh, this will look pretty good. And then, man, after I sanded it, as soon as I put any finish on it, it just kind of exploded with all this, this curly figure. And a lot of walnut can do that. I mean, they like where the crotch of the tree, separates, like the big branches separate. They usually save those pieces because it gets like this really cool swirly figure in there. And it's a wood that I really like to use.
I I'd tell you what, that Telecaster I'm looking at is amazing. I'm going to say this right now. When this episode comes out, you can scroll down below, check in the description section, go to the website, check out the gallery. Some of these guitars are insane. That Telecaster even has a bird's eye maple neck. Is that right?
I think the fingerboard, the fretboard is bird's eye maple. Yeah,
that's insane. That's one of my favorite woods. It looks so pretty.
Yeah, I've had a hard time recently getting a hold of pieces that are that filled with bird's eye. I don't know if what's going on. I've had some stuff that I bought 15 years ago off eBay shops and things like that. That at the time the price wasn't insane, and I've just had it drying or just resting in my shop someday for when I get to it. And I recently used the last piece of it. And so, within the last month or so, I just started checking for more. And man, I can't find anything that looks anywhere near, that stuff for anywhere near the money. I mean, it's if I do find something like that, it's just insanely expensive. So I guess I just got lucky and got some cool looking stuff years ago.
I do that.
Guitar builders in general seem to be, it's pretty common to be wood hoarders. I mean, there's people that, they always talk about, I bought this piece, 30 years ago. I've just been waiting to use it. It's like they dedicate, twice as much space to wood storage as they do to shop tools. And I am not unlike that. I mean, I've got some stuff that I've got more wood probably that to make, I'll never get to the wood that I've got at the rate that I make guitars. So
I do have to say the bird's eye maple has always been one of my favorites. One of the guitars I really liked back in the day was Eddie Van Halen made a Wolfgang guitar with PV, and they did bird's eye maple on the neck on that one, and it's a solid piece of bird's eye maple. So it's they hogged up a bunch of it to make it, but
yeah, that's why I can't find some. I like the look of it too.
Some of the original guitars they had, the bird's eye maple, I think they were just using it as kind of like a test, because I do have one of I ran across a patent pending model, which was when they first started testing like the bird's eye maple neck, and it looked pretty good. But then I ended up buying one from a later year. That's after they started. It was the patent had already gone through, so I bought a later year model, and the bird's eye on that one is way better. And I think some of the thing was just the popularity of it or the demand of it, and some of it is also, like you said, those guitar making people or places even they just hoard so much wood, and they source it from everywhere, and they're just gobbling up all the good stuff and just hiding it in a warehouse.
Right.
I'd like to point a finger at Gibson. They were known, let's see here, it would have been in the early, it would have been about 2010 or so. Let me Google this. Yeah, Gibson, in about 2011 or somewhere in there, got caught illegally sourcing wood. So that was, those guitar dudes with the big companies, they buy so much wood, and they just hog it all up and stick it in a warehouse. And Gibson was, they got in some hot water in the 2010s a few different times for doing things like that. But that's probably not something you have to run into to look and worry too much about, because you're only buying tiny quantities. And even like you said, you bought the walnut for this guitar out of a scrap bin somewhere, which is ingenious. Right. I would have never thought to do that.
That's a huge advantage that I have, is I don't have a huge client base that I have to continually please. Those guys are chasing sales, and, guitar players can be kind of finicky and fickle. I mean, if it's not, the people are like, if it's not, mahogany body, then I'm not playing it. And so those guys got, other people they answer to, where I've got some leeway to make. I use more local woods, sometimes a little bit non-traditional stuff. Like I use a lot of walnut and a lot of cherry and stuff, because I like the looks of it. I like the way it works, and I can get it local. I mean, there's lumberyard here that the guy's got just a small family mill operation. I can go in there and just pick through board by board, and he's got it all individually priced, and the prices are pretty good. And so it's fantastic. I mean, I've even went to, you can even get stuff at Menards, and they're craft bin that, like a piece of figured wood will get kind of thrown in with the big batch of individually wrapped maple boards that they've got in there. I mean, if you look around, I mean, and kind of know what you're looking for, there's some, cool looking stuff out there that, you don't have to, hog it all up or have a warehouse to hold it all.
Well, that's something that, I mean, you being a builder and having, knowing this is something I would have never, ever in a million years thought to do that. And that's one of those things where just because you're doing it and you've got exposure to it, and it's just such a crazy thing. Cause like I said, I would have never thought about that. I would have never thought to go to like a Menards and just be like, what do you got? And they're like, we got this scrap stuff. And it's like, I'll take that piece, I would have never in a million years ever, like it never would have crossed my mind. And it's just wild to think like you've got a lot of ingenuity when it comes to this. You're not just like I said, you're not just slapping together like here's this piece of wood, here's that piece of wood. I cut it all there. It looks like every other guitar I ever built. Because like I said, if you go to your gallery, no two guitars you've built seem to look even remotely close to the same.
I think I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah. Are you custom making all these for people, or how is this all going down?
Either for custom orders for people or just things that I want to make for me. I've went back and forth with the idea of, having a kind of a dedicated line, a design or a couple designs, a handful of designs that I only make these. And there's some benefits to that. I mean, I could definitely streamline and speed up my build process if I jigged up and built fixtures for just building, guitars with this width of neck and with this depth of body, things like that. This headstock where the tuners are in the same spot every time. And, I could definitely speed up the process, but I mean, I'm like almost 50 and I keep thinking I only have so many guitars left in me, and there's a whole lot that I still want to build. And if I just built like, the same 3 models over and over again, I might, make some sales if people really were interested in that particular body design. But I can't seem to say no to like custom project. If somebody comes to me and says, oh, I want to build, this. And I'm like, well, that's exciting. It may not be something that I would ever really want to go buy, but I think it's, an exciting challenge to be part of, making this person's unique idea, come to life. I mean, they've got all the specs and we talk through all the design, decisions from the beginning of the build to the end of the build. And I have, most of my projects have been that way. And so some of those guitars on the website are, client builds where that was their idea to, for instance, there's a Grover Jackson inspired Neo Schoen model. The guy, wanted it to be a 7-string. So we kind of took the Schoen model as a base and totally modified it and made it into a 7-string. But in doing that, I mean, I have to make all the templates and jigs and fixtures and measure everything like from scratch every time. And so it adds, just a ton of time to the entire build process.
Well, let me ask you this. How much, if I was just like, hey, I want a guitar like this and it wasn't overly complicated, how long would it take you like start to finish to build a guitar? Are we talking like a year? Or are we talking 6 months? Or can you crank it out over, I mean, probably not a weekend, but like.
Right. Definitely not a weekend for me anyway. It's been more than a year, and it's also been around the 6-month time frame. Those were actually pretty good estimates. If it's something I've built before and it's something I've got, jigs and fixtures and maybe even templates made up for, I could, depending on the type of finish that you wanted, it could be a matter of months. I mean, it could be like 3 or 4 months, 6 months, if you wanted, like a lacquer finish or something that needed some extra time to cure. And then if it was like a full-on custom project where we were starting from zero, then, I mean, technically, depending on my, schedule, it could maybe be that short, but most likely it's probably going to be like a year.
Oh, cool. So all these guitars have a lot of love put into them. It's not something you're just quick firing out and be like, boom, got it done, pay me. It's
right.
You're putting the love into this and actually taking the time to make it as much of a piece of art as you are 100% playable and very functional.
Yeah, that's the idea. And, that's a fear I have too, is that, okay, I'm making this one-off for this one person. What if I screw something up halfway through? I don't want to be building, like an expensive piece of firewood. And so usually in those cases, I'll build 2 or 3 of them at the same time, which also makes the build process go longer. But in doing that, I have kind of a practice one. It's not usually not 3, but it's usually 2. I have a practice one. And so I'm, I'll at the end, I'll keep it or, whatever, so that I don't usually use fancy wood or anything making that one. But I use that as a guide for some of the more complicated design decisions or woodworking processes to say, okay, it worked out. I didn't, blow this one apart. That's all cool. So then I, move on to that step on the actual guitar itself. And so that's really worked. That's been a benefit in that I haven't, knock on wood, blown anyone's, custom guitar up mid build yet, but
okay, yeah, that's cool. I guess I would have never thought to build like a practice one first and then move on to the next one, or use one as like the testing model and the other one can be what your final specs get to be at. That's genius.
Yeah, I kind of have to do that just because I don't use CNC machines and I don't use any it's all kind of hand controlled routers and saws and so if I move forward with something that I think is going to work a certain way and it turns out to be, I should have done step 12 before doing this. Those things I need to figure out, ahead of time. And so not only, do these custom one-off projects look different, but I mean, in the way they're put together, it may mean that I've got to take like a whole new route to building them. I mean, a whole new perspective on, well, this thing, attaches this way. And so I really need to do this to the body before I do that piece. And so that planning, it also needs to change. And so sometimes it's not just, doing everything from step 1 to step N and just the shape and the look is different. I mean, it's, the entire process could be different as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking like, even as far as like, I got to put the bridge here on this guitar, like something as simple as that, to someone like me could mean a disastrous effect if you end up putting it just a little bit wonky one direction or not quite pitched the right way. And I don't know that it just, I'm like, my palms are sweating just thinking about it. Like just making a mistake like that would be absolutely just devastating as far as building a guitar.
I think I've learned more about building guitars from recovering from mistakes like that or similar things like that than I have in all of the, the forums and that kind of stuff, because you can only learn so much from, a picture and the description. I mean, there's tons of great information out there, but when you actually put the bridge in the wrong spot or you actually, accidentally cut something too short, you're like, okay, well, what do I make this into now? I've got to recover from this. I've got, 3 months into this guitar build. So it's no longer a Strat. Now it's a Hawk, it's a headless, so you have to, you've got to figure out ways to recover from that. I don't have the luxury of just dumping it into the scrap bin and saying, okay, well, the next one's coming down the line.
Yeah.
So I guess, Bob's guitar is going to be this next one. But,
yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the things, like you said, you can go online and everyone's like, I built this guitar. These are the specs. When I did this, I had to do one of these and stuff like that. But almost nobody will ever admit, I made this mistake and this is how I fixed it. I mean, that's something you will not see too much of on the internet at all. I mean, that goes for guitar building, painting something. I mean, that goes everything. People are not too willing to admit their mistakes. Do you think some of that has to do with the fact that the mistake is actually like the biggest like you said, it's one of the places where you've learned the most. And so some people are like, oh man, I stressed over this for so long. And this is actually where the real work is at in this is troubleshooting. And do you think that's why some of the people are less likely to give up some of their secrets as far as like, I messed this part up, but I fixed it this way? Or do you think it's something where they just don't want to admit that they made the mistake in the first place?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it seems like there's a whole lot of guitar builders and it's probably not just guitar builders. I mean, any kind of hobbyist that, and I don't consider myself much more than that. I mean, a hobby guitar builder. But there's so much of those people that are just, it's so easy to put on this front of being, making yourself look like a professional factory. I mean, it's so easy to build a website and to build, and to put pictures out there. And I think people get wrapped up sometimes in like maybe trying to represent themselves a little bit more than they are. And I've been guilty of that. And, talking to someone, who's interested in, a custom project, I sometimes I hesitate to say, yeah, I'm just a dude working in my garage. I don't, they use terms like, oh, you and your company and stuff. And so it's like, that's kind of maybe overstating a little bit.
Yeah.
But, so I don't know. I mean, I definitely am not, I don't know, maybe it's just that they think they won't have faith that they're not going to screw up their project. If somebody, if I wanted to build a car and I went to, my neighbor who happened to, have put together a few, and he said, oh, I learned a lot from all these tons of mistakes I made. I'm not quite so sure. I'd be like, okay, here's all my money. Build me, the next car that you have to recover from all these mistakes.
Oh, that's true.
So I don't know. I mean, I think it depends on the client. I mean, it depends on what they're looking to get out of it. I mean, I've been lucky that I've worked with people that were much more interested in, or as interested, I guess, in the process. They were making they've had the picture in their head of this custom guitar that they wanted, and they were excited to be part of the process. They didn't have a problem waiting as long as they had to wait, or they understood that I was making this up in a certain way. I mean, as I went along, and they were excited by that. When there's just as many people on the other end of the spectrum that are like, I'm not waiting a year. I mean, I'm going to go to Guitar Center right now, and I'm going to pick from 500 guitars that they've got, and because I want it right this minute. And that's a totally different person. I totally get that. But,
yeah, it makes total sense. Like the fact that you are aware of that is I can't think of the right word right now, but it's the right way to look at things. Let me just say that, because no two people are the same. No two people want the same thing out of something, regardless what it is, building a custom guitar, or like we said, a car, or whatever it happens to, may be. So it's very smart of you to just be like, oh, people don't want to wait a year for a guitar. Like, then my shop is junk or whatever, like it makes sense for you to have your head is in the right spot when you're thinking about this, because what you're making is literally just as much an instrument as it is a work of art. This is all being fabricated literally out of thin air based on someone's idea that they're conveying to you, which is, it's no different than consigning an art piece from somebody, like, hey, I want you to make something kind of like this or like this, and maybe do it a little bit like this, and they make you a painting or something. It's kind of like my idea as far as I have to convey it to somebody else, and then they have to try their best to build this idea that I've described to them. So it's really kind of cool. You get to like help people channel their ideas into an actual physical thing that is, like I said, just as much a work of art as it is a 100% playable instrument.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a blast. I think I got lucky enough to learn from the very beginning that if I wasn't upfront and honest with people in that respect, to say, look, I haven't built hundreds of guitars, and I built some that I think turned out great, and some that have some warts and things here, but I think that makes them all the more interesting. And I think the type of person that's open to that is going to be the person that I really want to work with. And because the build time is, extended compared to other factories, I have to work with this person for, months, if not, a year. And so I'd much rather have that honest relationship than try to represent myself as, some professional guitar factory that everything is going to go perfect, and then have somebody that, is constantly upset because it's taken too long, or, it didn't turn out exactly the way that we had discussed or was in their mind's eye. And so then, just have a disappointed person. I mean, that's no good for either one of us. So,
yeah,
I guess I've knowing that that's the type of person that I want to work with long term, it works for me to be honest at the beginning, because then if it turns off the other people, then it's fine, because I didn't really probably need to work with them anyway. Plus, it gives me more time to build, all the guitars that I want for me. So
yeah, it makes sense.
Yep.
I mean, it's like if you're selling apples and someone's like, I want an orange, and you're just like, I don't have oranges, and then I mean, it totally makes sense,
Right.
I mean, as laughable as it is, not everybody thinks that way though. Like, I mean, it's easy to get downtrodden and be like, wow, this person didn't want to do the build because it was going to take, 6 months to a year. And it's like, I mean, it'd be easy to just be like, well, like, meh, it's sad,
Right.
sad deal. But you've got, like I said, you've got your head in the right place, which is, it's not like mind blowing, but it's very good to hear, because it's not. I mean, maybe I'm just speaking on my own terms, where it's like if somebody thinks that I don't know, like Audible Farm, like, oh, this is something blah blah whatever, and I'd be pretty downtrodden if someone had didn't want to do the podcast or something like that. But, it's also, I never really think about it in a positive aspect. So you got your brain in a nice positive spot, which is very helpful, especially, as things progress in our society where, like lockdown and all that other stuff. It's good to have your head in the right spot. And it's very easy to see that you've got a good passion for this, and what you want to make and who you want to make it for, and you're willing to help people along with their designs and have their visions come to life, which is crazy. I mean, it's the art aspect of this is not lost on me, because this is, like I've said it a million times, this is so much an art form as it is just simple woodworking, and nothing about this is easy. I don't know if I would ever want to attempt this blindly on my own. It's crazy cool stuff. I always, like I said, I've always wanted to build a custom guitar. I have no knowledge or any desire to try to build a neck though. And I mean, that was always like the thing that was like, oh, this is too crazy. Oh, I got a good one here for you.
Yeah.
Bolt-on neck or glue-on neck? Let me ask you about that. Have you done both, or it looks like you got one of both, at least one of both on your gallery here? Yeah,
I've done more bolt on, or screw in, or however you want to describe it, kind of both. I mean, everyone just kind of calls it bolt on if it's not glued in, really. But I mean, it's there's kind of two different techniques, and either it's basically just wood screws that go through the back of the the body into the base of the heel of the neck, and so I hesitate to call that bolt on because they're actually screws. But because the other method is like something I've done as well, where you actually set in a threaded insert into the heel of the neck that accepts a traditional bolt, and so you actually run a bolt through the back of the neck, and then it goes into a threaded insert that's into the neck heel itself. And so I like doing that, just because if you have to remove the neck, more than a few times, you don't have to worry about the actually wood getting stripped out. I mean, that's a problem with any kind of screw going in and out of, wood, especially one where you're trying to tighten it as tight as, you are your guitar neck. And so I've done both of those. I mean, the bolt on, with the machine screws is a little bit more finicky, because instead of just driving a screw through a hole and into the wood, you have to, the bolt position has to line up exactly where the threaded insert is. Otherwise, it's things are not going to, go together well. And you're, worst case, you're going to, totally screw up your bolt or strip out your insert. So I've never really put a ton of investigation or a ton of weight behind all the arguments. That's another argument goes along with all the tone wood stuff. Is there's a big argument about kind of sound and vibration transfer between the neck and the body, and whether or not you want to have a glued in neck or whether or not you want to have a bolt on neck. And some people are on opposite ends of the argument as to whether or not the glue actually inhibits vibration on a set neck. So usually my decision is mostly based on the guitar design itself, kind of like where the where the neck meets the body, and if I've got if it's a design like an SG or a Firebird or something like that, or a Les Paul Jr., where the fretboard kind of terminates basically right at the head of the body, then I really like to use like a set neck, a glued-in neck, because then it gives me a high level of fretboard access, like upper fret access, and you don't have a heel of the body like on a typical like a Telecaster or a Strat. It's got a pocket that the neck sits in that can get in the way of the palm of your hand when you're trying to play at the higher register. Mm-hmm. So if I can get away with not using a heel on the body, then I do that. Something like a Tele or a Strat that the fretboard rests more into the body, then you have a need for like kind of a pocket for it to rest on. And so it's really the kind of the style, the body and neck shape that kind of determine whether what kind of neck joint that I use.
That totally makes sense. I'm glad I asked, because I always just figured like it depended on who built the guitar. They're like, I like glued on necks, and they just glue it on to like whatever guitar, or like
yeah, it can. I mean, it can be. I mean, you can find ways around it if you just absolutely only want to do bolt-on necks, or you only want to do set necks. I mean, you can totally incorporate that into your design and modify it in a way that that allows it to happen. I mean, you're subject to you need so much meat around the neck to make it stable, and so you're like, well, I gotta I don't have enough meat to avoid using a heel unless I set the neck 2 inches deeper into the body, and so then the the body dimensions are different, so, but if that's the way you want to go, you might be happy with, that design decision. So,
so it is all possible to an extent then. That's also really cool to know that, like, you're not just like, well, I'm building a Telecaster, has to be bolt-on. It absolutely has to be. Like, you could, if you had to, you could modify it and maybe even make some sort of a set neck type deal. That's cool.
For sure. I've made more set neck Telecasters than I've made bolt-ons. I think I've only made one bolt-on. I really like a long neck tenon situation where the neck, even though it's not the fretboard, the neck actually goes deep into the body. And so I'll use like an extended, like the body will extend into the neck will extend into the body further than you can see, and I'll cover it up with a pick guard. Mm-hmm. And so it looks like a traditional Tele, but if the neck and body look like they join in the exact same way, but if you flip it over, there's no heel. I mean, it's just,
cool.
It's more looks more like a Les Paul body and neck joint, where the neck just disappears into the side of the body, and there's no heel there to get in your way. I've done that probably more than I've done bolt-ons.
Oh, cool. Speaking of bolt-on Tele, I'm back at your gallery on your website, which, seriously, people, go to the website, check it out, slrguitars.com. You got to look it up. The Tele on here with the 4 pickup combination.
Oh,
is that the one that's bolt-on, or is that a glued-on neck?
That one is bolt-on. It's it's got neck screws on it, and that's it's just be a big ugly monstrosity. It's kind of my interpretation, or a kind of a tribute to Steve Morris's Franken Tele that he used with the Dixie Dregs back in the 70s, and I had most of those parts laying around, and I was going through a period where I was listening to a ton of Steve Morris and the Dixie Dregs, and so I was like, man, that guitar always looks so cool, and I'm sure if I put this together, I'll play just like Steve Morris. And so I put that together and purposely was very careless while I was making it. I mean, I let tools fall on it and get it all kind of bent up and dinged up, and to kind of make it look a little relic, I guess, if you want to call it that. And so that's fun guitar to play. There's a ton of different tones in it. Nothing sounds like Steve Morse when I play it, but it's fun to play.
I want to say I saw on your Facebook page you made a post about that, actually.
I might have.
That guitar is so cool looking. I actually, I see your post actually from that on your Facebook page. But Well, that's another one. Go to the Facebook page, check it out. Tons of cool stuff there as well. But I actually went to your website, found this guitar, copied the link, and sent it to a buddy, and he was just like, "Dang, man, that's so cool! This guy's making guitars in Iowa too." And we're kind of into the whole ultra modded guitar type deal, and that one's another one. If you guys want to look at a fun guitar, go check that out at the slrguitars.com website. That's a ton of fun. Like, I love your gallery in there. It looks like there's one of just about every guitar you could imagine in there. There's Tele style guitars, there's Strat style guitars. You got some pseudo PRS kind of double cutaway kind of ish guitars. There's a really cool offset one here that's I wouldn't even call it. It's not even like a Tele. It's not quite a Jazz Master. It's something in between.
Oh, yeah.
That's a cool looking one.
Sort of an offset Tele, like the base of that is kind of like, Tele meets Jazz Master. I've never been a Tele guy just because of the sound of them. I've never been into the twang, of the bridge pickup in the Tele. But so I kind of wrote them off until I started building guitars, and I had an insane amount of respect for Leo's design and his idea in that. Not only that, probably with the Strat too, but just like the function before form thing. I mean, it's just a rock solid, super simple, machine, for a musician to use. I mean, it's not, fancy finishes and carved tops and everything. I mean, it's just like as rock solid and dependable as you can get. And so that, and I've in turn built a decent amount, and I don't even really want to call them Teles, but I mean, kind of interpretations on that shape, because I've had a lot of respect for that idea, but I haven't always appreciated every little thing about it. And so then I incorporate, as a builder, I can incorporate things from other guitar designs that I like, and so I've always hated, sorry, Leo, but I've always hated the Telecaster headstock shape. I mean, I think I don't like it.
That
and so
super slim Fender headstock.
Yeah. So I can use any headstock that I want because I'm making the design decision. So I could, I totally change it up and put my own headstock design, or, like a few little things, different pickup configurations, or not using a traditional, metal Tele bridge. I don't really love the saddles, like the barrel saddles on a Tele bridge. So I could put any kind of, I could put a stop tail and Tune-o-matic on it, and be basically feel like it's playing like a Gibson, but it's actually shaped like a Tele, and it's super simple. So those are some of the things that I like. A lot of the guitars I built for me are just experimenting with those ideas, experimenting with different design decisions, experimenting with different finishes, and they're not meant to be like a model that I want, someone else to buy 10 of. I mean, it's just trying to see what works and what doesn't work.
Well, speaking of people buying guitars from you, have you sold any guitars to people that play around Iowa? Like, if I go out to a show in Iowa somewhere, will I see somebody playing one of your guitars? Is that a possibility?
In Iowa, there's probably, I don't know if you've heard of Dave Paris. He's a great guitar player in Cedar Rapids, and he's the one that I built the Neil Schoen inspired 7-string for.
Okay. That's the one. Is that the one in your gallery, the slightly white one?
It's like maybe the picture's not right. It's gold. It's shoreline gold.
Yep. I clicked on it. Yep. I see a better picture of it here. Yeah.
So I'm not a photographer, obviously, but
no, it was just the way the light was hitting it on the one picture made it look a little off-white. But when you click on it, it's obviously gold in the other pictures.
Yeah, that's something that I really need to do a better job at, and that's connecting with more local people, because there's so many internet resources, and because I'm not I'm not out there knocking on doors trying to make tons of sales. I've basically went from one custom one-off project to another, and in between, what little downtime I've had, that I've made progress on, my own instruments. And so I've had enough business to keep me going. I guess what I've been missing is, maybe the old school kind of way of drumming up business, and that's going out to like open mic nights or going out to see and live shows and talking to the musicians after the show and that kind of stuff. So I honestly don't know if there's any more awareness of locally than nationally, that as far as me being a guitar builder.
Well, let's drum up some business for you right
Yeah,
now.
let's might improve that.
Yeah, SLRguitars.com. It's located here in Iowa, everybody. It's going to be hard to beat this. Right now I'm looking at one of your double cutaway. It's almost like a Les Paul Jr. or like a Melody Maker style guitar. It's got the tiger finish on the top. Single coil. No, it's a humbucker with 2 open rails on it. This thing is insanely cool looking.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. That was actually that was one of those test guitars that I built for myself.
This is a test guitar. This is insanely cool looking for a test guitar.
That's kind of joking earlier about finding wood and cutoff bins. The top of that guitar came from. Do you know what the restore is? Like the heavy restore.
Yeah.
So I was poking around in the restore, and I saw like this probably 6-inch wide piece of like floor molding. What do you call it? Baseboard molding. Just must have got pulled out of somebody's house, and it had this ugly brown finish on it, but it was like this insanely long piece, and I could tell that it was maple. And so I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Well, I turned it to the back of the unfinished side, and the entire thing was just like curly, figured maple. I'm like, holy crap, I can make, a top out of that. And so that guitar is from another $2 or $3 piece of wood that I just happened to find at the restore.
Brilliant, man. You know what to look for here. So that's what this is coming down to, is you've done this.
Maybe I just go through enough dirty bins that I can see it. But
you got an eye for this, man. I'm actually at the gallery. I clicked on the picture. I'm scrolling through all these other pictures. The back of the neck even looks good on this guitar. It is insanely cool.
Yeah, that turned out pretty good. The finish was an experiment. I'd like the finish to be a little bit more orange than it's a little more brown if you look at it in person, but like I said, I mean, most of what I've been doing are just kind of my own experiments as I, learn the finer points of finishing, especially is kind of a finicky thing that if you don't do it, over and over and over again, you don't really. I mean, eventually you're going to get a finish on the guitar, but it may not be exactly what you were going for. But
yeah. Gosh, this is super cool. I got to say thanks for sitting down and taking some time with me to, sit and talk about all your guitars and stuff. It was kind of...
Yeah, thanks for reaching out. It was great to talk to you. I would appreciate the opportunity to chit-chat with someone else about the music in Iowa and guitar building in Iowa.
Yeah, anybody that's listening to this that wants to either have your own custom guitar or is maybe looking at some ideas, or maybe you just want to see some really cool guitars, like I said, check it out. There's a website down below. Otherwise, type it in, slrguitars.com. Unless you've been listening this whole time and cruising the website while I've been talking about it, because it's really, really cool to see some of the builds you've got here. Like I said, some of the woods are some of the coolest I've seen. Some of those bird's eye maple, as far as like some of the stain designs you've got, the pickup configurations, everything is really cool. You've got modern meets vintage. Everything kind of just is very unique to whatever it is. So if you want a guitar with 1 pickup, you want 2 pickups, you want humbuckers, you want 4 pickups, you want a 7-string, you want a bass guitar, hit them up. It's slrguitars.com.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Steve, it's been great talking to you. Is there anything else that you want to let everybody know while we're still on the line here?
Nope. I think I pretty much rambled long enough.
Oh, it's brilliant, man. I really appreciate you sitting down and taking some time out of your day to sit down and talk with me.
Yeah, it's great talking to you. Thanks, man.
Absolutely. Woo! Steve Reuter, ladies and gentlemen. That episode was awesome. It's cool to sit down and talk gear with somebody that makes the gear, Everybody that plays guitar likes to talk about guitars. I like 6 strings. I like bolt-on necks, humbuckers, and single coils. And well, guess what? Steve's done it all. And if you guys want to check out some of his stuff, highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. Scroll down into the description section, find the link for slrguitars.com, or go there yourself. Check it out. Go to the gallery. Look at some of the cool stuff. If you want to see more pictures, check out their Instagram page or their Facebook. The Instagram page is packed full of pictures. Some cool ones, some not on the website. Steve's got a good sense of humor. I saw he had a post on his Instagram talking about how some wood just doesn't want to be made into a guitar, and so you got to punish it. And it was a funny post. I dig it. It's super good. Steve is a great guy. I'm glad we kind of got in touch. It was a little bit just by luck that we got in touch, based on the fact that he made a Facebook page. He commented on something I did, and we were off to the races, man. Steve's a great guy. He's been building custom guitars now for, I guess he said his first one was in the 90s somewhere, and the website says he's been building guitars publicly for people since the 2000s. So he's been doing this for about 20 years. He knows what he's doing. It's like I said, if you don't believe me, go to slrguitars.com, check it out. Otherwise, on all the social media, it's at SLR Custom Guitars. That's Facebook and Instagram. I got links down below, so if you don't want to have to remember that, just come back to this, whenever you got time, and scroll down and check it out. Click on that link. Like I said, you got to check out the website and see some of the stuff in the gallery. It's pretty sweet. Anybody looking to make your own custom guitar, this might be the place to hit up. Hit up Steve. Like I said, you can go to the website and contact him through the website. Otherwise, go to the Facebook or Instagram. Hit him up. Let him know what you think of those guitars. Some of them are really cool. Everyone is very individual to itself. It's not like he's making, I made a guitar like this. Oh, I just made another guitar. Looks exactly the same. He's not doing that. He's testing out new things. He's making crazy stuff, and it's like I said, it's art meets functionality. It's modern meets vintage. It's pretty sweet. So check it out. Steve's got some cool stuff going on. I gotta say thanks to him for taking some time out of his day to sit down and talk with me, and for reaching out and talking. I believe it was the Matt Woods podcast I did. He said, hey, this was a great episode. I really liked it. And I said, you know what? Let's check out what you got going on, Steve. So we talked about it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, because this episode was one of my favorites. Like I said, I like gear talk, and there's nobody better to talk about gear with than the people that are making the gear. So hats off to you, Steve, for doing some really cool stuff. Like I said, it's art meets functionality. These guitars are neat. Check them out, slrguitars.com. Huge thanks, Steve. I also want to say thanks to everybody that listened to this podcast. If you play guitar, you don't play guitar, if you listen to some of the previous podcasts and you're just curious as to who some of these people are I'm talking to, check them out, hit them up. I really thank everybody for just listening to some of these episodes. And I've talked to a litany of people, all sorts of different people, from professional wrestlers to comedians to promoters to other podcasters to musicians to people that build guitars to you name it. Recording engineers. I've talked to promoters. I mean, like I said, you name it. I've talked to everybody on here, and I'm just trying to just see what everybody's up to. It's really kind of cool that we have this many entertainment options, and not only that, but it looks like you guys can have your own custom built guitar coming straight out of Iowa. slrguitars.com. That's super cool. So hey, thanks to Steve, thanks to everybody for listening. However you found this podcast, many thanks. If you guys want to look up some more stuff on Audible Farm, go to www.audiblefarm.com. That's our website. We've got links to everything we've got going on, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud, everywhere you can listen to our podcast. If you want to listen to the podcast on YouTube, go ahead and listen to it there. Otherwise, it's available everywhere you can stream podcasts, so you can download an app, search Audible Farm, find us, subscribe, listen to every episode. I just got to say, I really appreciate everybody tuning in. We've had quite a few people listening to some of these recent episodes, so I really got to say thanks. You can also, if you really want to support Audible Farm, you can go to www.audiblefarm.com, and then near the bottom, there's a post about some t-shirts that we have. We've got t-shirts available. We've also got hoodies available. Corrosive Screen Printing made us some hoodies and t-shirts, so shout out to those guys. If you guys want to support us, head over to the website, find that post about t-shirts and sweatshirts. Maybe if you like one, let us know. You can contact us through the website, otherwise Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. Shoot us an email, whatever you got to do. Let us know. I'm willing to ship the shirts anywhere within the continental United States. So that's pretty much anybody that's listening to this, except for the small handful of people that listen from overseas. Hey, guys. And you know what? I just got to say thanks to everybody for doing this. Thanks to Couchtown Coffee. Really appreciate their support every week. Listening to live music, loving live music. If you guys want to know more about Couchtown Coffee, maybe scroll back a few episodes and listen to that interview I did with Andrew. such a good guy. And, thanks once again to Steve. Thank you guys for listening. Dude, this episode was great. It was really great. It all just kind of came together out of nowhere, and it was really great. So thanks for listening. I will be back next week with another episode. Peace, everybody.